The vast expanse of the galaxy stretched beyond comprehension, a mosaic of stars and planets, each with its own story to tell. But none was more intriguing than Elysium Station, the crown jewel of intergalactic trade, where species from all corners of the universe coexisted in an uneasy alliance. Here, humanity, a relatively young race, had secured a place in the cosmos. But despite their progress, humans were often seen as inferior, less evolved, less cultured, and certainly not capable of mastering the finer arts of the galaxy. Leah Johnson had known this truth all her life. Born in New Orleans, she had grown up surrounded by the rich flavors of her African-American heritage. Her mother's kitchen had been her sanctuary, a place where every dish told a story of resilience, joy, and sorrow. Her roots ran deep in the soil of the South, and every seasoning, every technique, carried with it the echoes of generations past. Now, at the age of 25, Leah found herself in the sprawling metallic halls of Elysium, far from the comforts of her home. She had left Earth with a single purpose in mind: to prove that the food she cooked, inspired by the vibrant history of her ancestors, was as refined and worthy as any dish in the galaxy. But the road to proving that had been anything but easy. Elysium Station was a place where alien cultures thrived, their culinary traditions far more advanced than anything Leah had ever encountered. She had spent months learning the language of the spices, the techniques of the high-tier chefs who had trained under masters from species far older than humanity. Yet every time she presented her creations, they were met with condescension, if not outright disdain. To the aliens, her cooking was too simple, too earthy, too human. Leah had taken a job at the station's most prestigious restaurant, hoping that if she could impress the right people, she might be able to carve out a niche for herself in this alien-dominated world. It was here, in this kitchen, that she met Jatok, the head chef, an alien from the Jatu species, known for their unparalleled skill in the culinary arts. Tall and regal, with blue-gray skin and eyes that gleamed like cold metal, Jatok exuded an air of superiority that radiated through every word he spoke. "You," he had said when Leah first joined the kitchen, his voice dripping with disdain. "You are nothing more than a novice, a child playing with fire." His eyes narrowed as he scanned her, his posture rigid. "Your food will never compare to ours. We have perfected the art. Your species, are primitive." Leah's heart had sunk at his words, but her resolve had only hardened. She had been underestimated before. In New Orleans, she'd faced prejudice, ignored by culinary elites who had dismissed her because of her background. But she had always known that her roots, her culture, had something unique to offer. Now she would prove it. Jatok didn't take long to challenge her. "Cook for me, human, if you dare," he mocked, the smirk on his face barely hiding the amusement he found in her obvious discomfort. The challenge had been issued in front of the entire kitchen crew, a crowd of skeptical aliens watching intently, waiting to see if the human could rise to the occasion. Leah stood at the center of the kitchen, her heart pounding. She knew this moment could define her future. If she failed, she would be relegated to the shadows of Elysium Station, just another failed attempt by a human to break into a world that wasn't meant for them. But if she succeeded, if she proved herself worthy, then maybe, just maybe, her cooking could change the perception of humanity in the galaxy. Leah took a deep breath, gathering her strength. This was her moment. No longer would she allow anyone to dismiss her culture, her food, her history. She would make them see. She looked up at Jatok, meeting his icy stare. "I accept your challenge," she said, her voice steady but filled with an undercurrent of defiance. And so the stage was set. The battle lines were drawn, not just for the title of the station's top chef, but for something far more important, the right to be seen, to be respected, to be heard. Jatok's presence in the kitchen was impossible to ignore. His towering frame cast a long shadow over the staff, and his every movement seemed deliberate, calculated. He was the embodiment of the alien culinary elite, methodical, precise, and uncompromising. His people, the Jatu, were known across the galaxy not only for their advanced technologies, but for their unparalleled mastery of cuisine. Their meals weren't just sustenance, they were art, crafted with an almost religious reverence. Jatok, as the head chef, was the living embodiment of this culinary prowess. The kitchen itself, a pristine, clinical space with gleaming metallic surfaces, stood in sharp contrast to the warmth of Leah's memories of her mother's kitchen in New Orleans. It was cold, sterile, and uninviting. The air was filled with the hum of advanced cooking equipment, a far cry from the rich aromas of sizzling gumbo, frying chicken, or simmering stews she had known. Every dish here was calculated down to the smallest detail, every ingredient weighed, measured, and evaluated against an impossible standard. Here food was not about comfort, it was about perfection, and that perfection, Jatok insisted, could never be achieved by a mere human. The first time Leah truly interacted with Jatok was a week after her arrival. The kitchen had been unusually quiet that morning, with all the chefs preparing for the rush of orders that would come once the restaurant opened. Leah had been nervously practicing her own recipes in the far corner, working with a mix of alien ingredients she had only recently learned to identify. Her hands moved with purpose, though doubt gnawed at the edges of her confidence. Jatok had walked by her station without a word, his eyes briefly glancing at the dish she was preparing. The stew she had been perfecting, a mixture of alien root vegetables and seasoned meats from Earth, bubbled softly in a cast-iron pot. It was her take on a traditional southern gumbo, but with a twist of the unfamiliar. She had hoped he wouldn't notice her work, but his sharp, penetrating gaze was impossible to miss. He stopped. "You call that food?" Jatok's voice was cold, dismissive. This is an insult to the art. How do you expect to make anything worthwhile with whatever that is?" Leah stood frozen for a moment, her heart racing. She had expected criticism, but the harshness of his words cut deeper than she anticipated. She had seen the scorn in his eyes, a scorn reserved for those he deemed beneath him. Humans, in his eyes, were just a footnote in the galaxy's culinary history, nothing more than primitive creatures with no place in a sophisticated kitchen like this one. I'm trying to incorporate Earth flavors with some local ingredients," Leah said, her voice steady, but there was an edge of frustration creeping in. "It's a fusion, a blend of my culture and the world around me." Jatok tilted his head, a humorless chuckle escaping his lips. "Your culture is irrelevant here. Your people's food is nothing more than a crude attempt to combine unrelated elements. There's no sophistication in it. It lacks balance, refinement. It is chaos. The Jatu have spent millennia perfecting our craft. What you call fusion is nothing more than a meaningless mess." The sting of his words was sharp, but Leah refused to let him see how deeply they hurt. She clenched her fists at her sides, her resolve growing stronger with each passing second. "I disagree," she said, lifting her chin, meeting his gaze with a quiet defiance. "Food is about more than balance and refinement. It's about history. It's about identity. My food has stories in every bite. And that's something you'll never understand." For a moment, Jatok's eyes flashed with something unreadable. He regarded her for a long time, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. Finally, he spoke. "We'll see if your stories are enough to win you this challenge." His voice was low, like the rumble of thunder before a storm. "Cook for me, human, if you dare." The words hung in the air, a challenge and a warning all at once. Jatok's eyes glinted with barely contained amusement as he turned on his heel and walked away, leaving Leah standing in the shadow of his contempt. Leah's mind raced. This wasn't just about cooking. This was about proving herself, not only to Jatok, but to every person who had ever underestimated her, dismissed her, or ignored the value of her culture. She wasn't going to let this alien chef dictate her worth. She took a deep breath, her fingers brushing against the rough surface of the pot in front of her. She could do this, she would do this. She didn't need to prove anything to Jatok. She needed to prove it to herself, to her ancestors, to her people, and the only way to do that was through the food, through the soul of every dish she created. The weeks leading up to the challenge were a blur of pressure, isolation, and intense preparation. Leah threw herself into the task with a singular focus, blocking out everything around her. Every day she spent hours poring over ancient recipes, experimenting with new techniques, and testing alien ingredients she had never seen before. Her kitchen station was cluttered with strange fruits, vegetables, and meats from planets Leah had never even heard of. Yet she didn't flinch. She couldn't afford to. Żartok had not spoken a word to her since their confrontation, but she could feel his eyes on her whenever he passed. His presence loomed over her, a constant reminder of the impossible standard she had to meet. It was as if he were waiting for her to fail, silently rooting for her to crumble under the weight of the challenge. Every mistake, every misstep she made felt magnified in his cold, calculating gaze. But Leah refused to let it break her. The dishes she was developing were more than just food. They were an expression of herself. She was blending her African-American heritage with the exotic flavors of the alien worlds, creating a fusion that was as much about storytelling as it was about taste. It wasn't just about creating something delicious. It was about proving that her people, their history, and their culture had value in this intergalactic kitchen. Every ingredient she used carried meaning, from the hearty beans of Earth's deep south to the vibrant, fiery spices of the Żartu planets. This was more than a challenge. It was a declaration of pride. But even with her passion and determination, doubt crept in. Leah would sometimes look at her workstation, her hand hovering over the ingredients, unsure of whether she could pull it all together. Could she really create something worthy? Could she convince the universe that humans had a place at this table? Her doubts were often silenced by Samira, a fellow chef who had been at Elysium for several years. Samira, a black woman from a distant colony, had become Leah's closest ally in the kitchen. She understood what it felt like to be underestimated. She knew the weight of being judged for something beyond your control, your race, your background, your heritage. "You've got this," Samira said one evening as they worked side by side. "Don't let them get to you. They can't see what you see in the food, but that doesn't mean it's not there." Leah smiled, grateful for her friend's support. "I just wish I could see it too. I've been trying to blend everything, the flavors, the textures, but sometimes it feels like I'm just mixing things up without any purpose." Samira turned to her face serious. "The purpose is you. The purpose is what you're putting into it. It's your story, Leah. The rest, they'll see it when they taste it." It was the encouragement Leah needed. Samira had been through the same doubts, the same fights, and yet here she was, still standing, still thriving. And Leah realized that she didn't have to face this alone. She had her people, both the living and those who came before her, whose spirits and resilience were embedded in every dish she created. Each day, as the challenge drew nearer, Leah grew more confident. Her dishes began to take shape. Her gumbo, a blend of rich, savory roots and the tenderest cuts of alien meat, was evolving into something extraordinary. She added a touch of spice from a plant native to the Żartu homeworld, a fiery kick that would be unexpected for even the most seasoned taste buds. The combination of her southern heritage and the strange alien elements started to come alive, a reflection of both her roots and her growth. She wasn't just cooking, she was crafting a message, an invitation to the galaxy to taste what humanity had to offer. But there was still so much to do. The pressure was mounting. As the day of the challenge approached, Leah found herself awake late into the night, testing flavors, adjusting textures, and tweaking every detail of her dishes. It was exhausting, both mentally and physically, but Leah knew it was the only way. She had to be ready. She had to be perfect. Żartok's presence in the kitchen had become even more palpable. The cold sneer in his eyes whenever he walked past Leah's station reminded her of the high stakes. But this time she didn't shrink away. She stood taller, focusing on her work, knowing that every step she took brought her closer to proving him wrong. She could feel it now, a fire that had been kindling in her chest since her first day on Elysium, a fire that had only grown hotter with every challenge, every slight, every moment of doubt. It was her turn now, and no matter what happened, she wasn't backing down. The day of the challenge was fast approaching. The stakes had never been higher. But Leah, for the first time in weeks, felt ready. She was going to show Żartok and the galaxy what humanity could do when pushed to its limits. The day had arrived. Elysium Station, with its bustling corridors and gleaming walls, felt colder than ever. Today, the grand kitchen where all of the galaxy's elite chefs gathered would serve as the arena for the challenge that would define Leah Johnson's future. The air felt thick, charged with anticipation. Every inch of the kitchen buzzed with activity, but Leah couldn't help feeling like she was in another world, one where all eyes were on her, and the pressure of the moment was suffocating. She walked into the kitchen early, long before the competition would officially begin. The sunless light from the overhead lamps cast sharp, artificial shadows over the metallic counters, giving everything a stark, almost otherworldly feel. The stainless steel tools gleamed under the fluorescent lights, their perfection only a reminder of how different this place was from the humble kitchens she had worked in before. But this was her space now. She had earned her place here. Leah stood in front of her station, staring at the ingredients she had carefully selected for this moment. The Jatu root vegetables. The fiery spice from an alien plant. The combination of her ancestors' recipes with the unknown. An unexpected fusion of Earth's history and the untapped flavors of the galaxy. It was her masterpiece, and today it would either make or break her. Jatok, as always, stood at the center of the kitchen. His posture was perfect, his movements smooth and assured. He was like an immovable force, exuding confidence with every step. He surveyed the space like a lion waiting to pounce, his sharp eyes picking apart every detail, analyzing every ingredient. His assistants moved around him, tending to the different stations with precision. But it was clear that Jatok's presence dominated everything. Leah tried to block him out. She focused on the task at hand, carefully prepping the alien vegetables, chopping them with deliberate strokes. The familiar rhythm of chopping, mixing, and seasoning soothed her nerves, but every so often her thoughts drifted back to the challenge ahead. She couldn't afford to fail. This wasn't just a test of her skills, it was a test of everything she had come from, everything she had fought for. One of the chefs from another station walked past her, casting a curious glance at the work she was doing. His expression was unreadable, but she caught the way his lips tightened, as if he were trying to suppress a laugh. Humans, especially human cooks, had never been respected in the culinary world of the station. They were seen as mere imitators, struggling to compete with the centuries of tradition from species like the Jatu. But Leah knew something they didn't. This was more than just food. This was her fight, her stand against a galaxy that tried to write her off. Samira approached her station, her face calm but her eyes filled with a quiet intensity. "You're ready," Samira said, her voice low but steady. "I've seen what you can do. Just keep it simple. Keep it true to yourself. Don't try to be anything you're not." Leah gave a small, appreciative smile. Samira had been her rock throughout the past few weeks, offering advice, support, and comfort when it felt like the weight of the world was on her shoulders. Today, though, it was all on Leah. There would be no more coaching, no more assistance. This was the moment where all her hard work would either pay off or fall apart. Jatok approached her station, his icy gaze sweeping over her preparations. His lips curled into a small, knowing smirk. "You'll need more than a few herbs and spices to impress me, human," he said, his voice like a quiet thunder. "You cannot rely on gimmicks or novelty. This is the real test. Will you rise to the occasion, or will you crumble?" Leah didn't flinch. She locked eyes with him, her expression unwavering. "I'm not trying to impress you," she replied, her voice firm. "I'm cooking for the people who've been dismissed, for the people who know what real flavor is." Jatok didn't respond. He simply turned and walked away, his movements smooth and calculated, leaving a trail of icy silence in his wake. Leah breathed out slowly, forcing herself to focus on the task at hand. She could feel the weight of the eyes on her, patrons, fellow chefs, judges, and the other contestants, all waiting for her to fail. But she wouldn't. She couldn't. As the clock ticked down, the kitchen began to fill with the fragrant smells of the dishes being prepared. Alien ingredients sizzled and simmered, the quiet hum of culinary mastery resonating through the air. The final moments before the competition began were a blur. Everything was happening too fast, but in the chaos, Leah found clarity. She took a deep breath, her hands steady as she plated her dish. She added the final touch, the sprig of fresh herbs from earth, a reminder of where she came from and who she was. The dish was complete. Her heart raced in her chest, but the calmness of her preparation grounded her. "Time's up!" a voice called out from across the kitchen, signaling the end of the cooking portion. It was time. Leah looked at her creation one last time. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers, every bit of it, and that, she realized, was enough. The room fell into a heavy silence as the dishes were presented. The alien audience, critics, chefs, dignitaries, watched with a mix of fascination and disdain. The smell of exotic spices and sizzling oils lingered in the air, thick and intoxicating. Each dish gleamed under the crystalline lights of the station's dining hall, an exhibition of artistry and ego. At the center of it all, Leah Johnson stood, heart pounding like a drum against her ribs. Across from her, Żartok towered, composed and confident, his polished plating a testament to millennia of alien culinary dominance. "Present your dishes," the head judge, a serpentine creature with translucent skin, announced. Its voice was melodic, yet cold. Żartok stepped forward first, unveiling his creation. His dish looked like a piece of sculpted glass, elegant, colorless, balanced to perfection. He described it in a low, proud tone. A symphony of elemental essences, every molecule calibrated, every flavor in equilibrium. Perfection, as only the Żartu understand it. The audience murmured in approval. Leah's throat tightened, but she held her ground. She wasn't here to mimic perfection. She was here to show something real. When her turn came, she uncovered her dish, a bowl of deep, rich stew, steam curled upward in golden threads, carrying an aroma that was at once foreign and familiar. The judges leaned forward, intrigued but skeptical. The colors of the dish, amber, crimson and brown, glowed softly under the light. It was warm, alive, unapologetically human. "This dish," Leah began, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands, "is called home fire stew. It's inspired by the food I grew up with, gumbo from New Orleans, but made with ingredients from your worlds. It's about memory, struggle, and pride. Where I come from, food tells stories. This one tells mine." Żartok's expression barely changed, but his eyes flickered with disdain. "Stories do not feed the senses, human. Technique does." Leah ignored him. The first judge reached for a spoon, dipping it into the stew. A ripple of quiet anticipation spread through the crowd. The spoon rose, glistening with the thick, fragrant liquid, and then silence again as the judge took the first bite. At first nothing. Then the judge froze, its eyes widening slightly. The spoon hovered in mid-air. A soft sound escaped its throat, something between a sigh and a gasp. It set the spoon down slowly, as if afraid to break the moment. "What is this warmth?" the judge murmured, its voice quieter now, trembling. "It tastes of memory, of fire, of sorrow." It blinked rapidly, and to Leah's shock, a single tear slid down its transparent cheek. The audience gasped. Another judge leaned in, taking a cautious bite. Then another. The air shifted. The murmur of doubt turned into a wave of low, astonished whispers. Even the cold metallic scent of the kitchen seemed to change, sweetened by something more human, something emotional. Żartok's smirk faltered. He had expected the judges to dismiss her dish as crude or unrefined. Instead, he was watching the impossible unfold. These were beings who had long claimed to transcend emotion through art, and yet Leah's food had touched something deeper than logic. One of the younger alien chefs, standing in the audience, whispered, "It smells like home." Others nodded faintly, their expressions softening. Leah caught fragments of their murmurs. Comfort, soul, connection. Words that had no place in Żartok's sterile perfection. Żartok tried to reassert control. "Flavor is fleeting," he said sharply. "Sentiment is not substance. The novelty will fade." But even he could not hide the tension in his jaw as one of the judges turned to him. "Perhaps perfection is not the purpose," the judge said softly. "Perhaps art should make us feel." The moment lingered, heavy with meaning. Leah stood motionless, barely breathing. Her heart felt like it might burst, not from pride but from relief. For the first time she wasn't fighting to be seen. She was seen. Across the hall, Jatok's composure cracked. He stared at her dish, at the judges' faces, at the tears glimmering where none should exist. It was a wound to his pride, and he couldn't look away. Leah lowered her gaze, whispering under her breath, "Told you, food tells stories." The audience erupted in a low hum of awe. Leah had done it. She had shaken the unshakable. But as Jatok's eyes darkened with something far colder than anger, Leah knew this was only the beginning. The silence that followed the first few bites of Leah's dish was heavier than gravity. Every sound in the room seemed to vanish. No hum of the kitchen vents, no clinking of utensils, no murmuring crowd. Just the quiet rhythm of alien hearts processing something they couldn't define. Then slowly the sound returned, soft gasps, whispers, the shuffle of movement as one by one the judges reached again for their spoons. The second judge, a being with silver tendrils that shimmered like liquid glass, lifted its spoon, hesitation giving way to curiosity. "This taste, it shouldn't work," it said softly, its voice like chimes. The salt from the jatu root contradicts the spice. Yet it harmonizes. Its luminous eyes flickered with something close to wonder. It feels alive. Leah stood frozen, her pulse echoing in her ears. She didn't dare speak. Across the table, Jatok's jaw tightened. He hadn't expected this reaction, and the tension in his posture betrayed it. His arms folded behind his back, his head tilted slightly, as if trying to maintain control of a situation that was slipping through his grasp. One of the elder judges, its features lined like old bark, leaned forward. "Human," it said, the title sharp, yet not unkind. "You spoke of stories, of struggle. What story does this dish tell?" Leah swallowed hard, finding her voice. "It's about survival," she said. "It's about my people, about how we took what little we had and made it into something beautiful. Every flavor here has a history. The spice represents fire, the roots represent growth. Together, they tell the story of resilience." Her words hung in the air, charged with sincerity. The elder nodded slowly, tasting the stew again, before setting the spoon down gently. "There is truth in your food," it murmured, "and truth has flavor." The audience rippled with whispers. Some aliens looked uncomfortable, others intrigued. Leah caught glimpses of eyes glinting in approval, and others narrowing in quiet discontent. Not everyone appreciated her success. Not everyone wanted to. Jatok, however, refused to remain silent. He stepped forward, his voice slicing through the murmur like a blade. "Truth?" he said mockingly. "You call this truth? This is chaos disguised as sentimentality. Any chef can throw flavors together and call it emotion. Where is the precision, the discipline, the science?" The younger chefs flinched at his tone, but Leah stood her ground. "Precision can't replace soul," she replied, her voice calm but unwavering. "You build perfection in a lab. I build connection at a table. That's the difference." A collective intake of breath passed through the crowd. Jatok's eyes narrowed, his calm exterior beginning to crack. His species prized control above all things, and Leah's words had just struck at the core of his pride. Before he could respond, the first judge spoke again. "Chef Jatok," it said, addressing him formally, "we have tasted your dish as well." The judge lifted a piece of Jatok's crystalline creation. "It is flawless, yes, every molecule perfectly structured." It placed the fork down carefully. "But it is cold, there is no feeling here, no story." A murmur spread across the hall. The sentence cut deeper than any insult. For a Jatu chef whose entire life was built on the pursuit of perfect culinary equilibrium, to be told his food lacked feeling was the gravest critique imaginable. Jatok's mouth twitched. "Feeling," he repeated slowly, as though the word were poison. "Food does not need feeling. It requires mastery." "Perhaps," the elder judge said, looking at Leah again, "but mastery without feeling is empty." Leah exhaled softly. The words washed over her like sunlight through clouds. She didn't gloat, she didn't smile. Instead, she simply nodded, humbled and grateful. As the judging continued, it became clear that something had shifted, not just in the competition, but in the air itself. A quiet revolution had taken root. The alien chefs and patrons who had once scoffed at the idea of human cuisine now whispered amongst themselves, curiosity sparking in their voices. Leah caught fragments of phrases: depth, heat, emotion. Words that would never have been spoken in praise of a human chef before. Żartok's gaze lingered on her, unblinking, burning. For the first time, his arrogance faltered, replaced by something new: uncertainty. He didn't speak again, but the stiffness in his posture betrayed the storm brewing beneath. Leah turned back to her dish. The judges were still tasting, still whispering, still discovering something they had never found in their meticulously engineered plates. She felt the weight of history pressing against her shoulders, the echo of generations whispering through her heart. Maybe, she thought, this was more than just a competition. Maybe it was the start of something greater, a shift that no one, not even Żartok, could undo. And as the crowd's murmurs grew louder, one thing was certain. The galaxy had just tasted humanity for the first time, and it would never forget the flavor. When the final verdict came, it was not shouted or celebrated. It fell quietly, like a ripple through still water. The judges announced that both chefs had displayed excellence, but only one had transcended technique to reach something deeper. The words were clear. The human dish moved us in ways we did not expect. For a long moment the room was silent. No applause, no cheers, just the stunned quiet of realization. Then, slowly, the sound began to build. Soft claps from one corner, followed by murmurs, then a growing wave of applause that filled the hall like rising thunder. The crowd wasn't just applauding the food. They were applauding the moment, the shift, the undeniable truth that something had changed. Leah stood motionless, her chest tight, her hands trembling. She had done it. Against the odds, against the mockery, against centuries of alien culinary arrogance, she had made them feel. Every ounce of pain, pride, and perseverance from her ancestors had come together in that single dish, and now the galaxy had tasted it. She blinked, and for a second she thought she saw her mother's face in her mind, smiling, proud, the way she used to look when Leah nailed a recipe back home in New Orleans. Across the room, Żartok stood perfectly still. His expression was unreadable, but the tension in his shoulders spoke volumes. His composure was cracking, his pride bruised in a way no alien ego could easily recover from. He had spent centuries building his name, his art, his identity as the pinnacle of culinary perfection. Now a human, one from a species he considered primitive, had humbled him in front of the galaxy's elite. The lead judge addressed him directly. "Chef Żartok, your mastery is unquestionable," the being said, its tone formal yet faintly sympathetic. "But today, mastery alone was not enough." Żartok inclined his head stiffly. "I see," he replied, though his voice was low, heavy. He turned toward Leah, his eyes sharp, metallic. "Enjoy this moment, human. The galaxy's attention is fickle. Passion fades. Discipline endures." Leah met his gaze, not with triumph, but with quiet strength. "Maybe," she said softly, "but passion is what makes us alive. And today, it made you taste what living feels like." The words struck him harder than any victory speech could. He said nothing, only turned away, disappearing into the murmuring crowd. Samira appeared beside Leah, her eyes bright with pride. "Girl, you did it," she whispered, barely able to contain her smile. "You really did it." Leah let out a shaky laugh, still half in disbelief. "I just cooked," she said. "No," Samira said firmly. "You spoke. You spoke with food, and they listened." The applause finally subsided as the crowd began to disperse, but whispers followed Leah wherever she moved. Alien chefs approached her, some curious, some skeptical, others humbled. One of them, a young Tyrell with shimmering green skin, extended a trembling hand. "Your dish reminded me of my homeworld," it said. "I had forgotten what warmth felt like." Leah smiled, shaking its hand. "That's what food's supposed to do," she said. "Bring you home even if you're far from it." As the hall emptied, Leah found a quiet corner near the viewing window. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly, glowing in hues of violet and gold. For the first time since she'd arrived on Elysium Station, she felt at peace. She had carried her culture across light years and made it shine among the stars. Her communicator buzzed, a message from Earth. It was her mother's voice, warm and crackling through the static. "Baby, I saw the broadcast," she said, tears audible even through the distortion. "You made us proud. You showed them who we are." Leah's throat tightened. "Thanks, Mama," she whispered. "I just did what you taught me. Put love in every bite." She ended the call and took a deep breath, letting the quiet sink in. Around her the whispers continued. Plans for interviews, invitations to alien feasts, offers from other restaurants. But Leah wasn't thinking about fame. She was thinking about legacy. She realized then that this wasn't just about proving herself. It was about opening a door that had been locked for too long. A door for every human chef, every artist, every dreamer who'd been told they didn't belong. And somewhere deep in the bustling heart of Elysium Station, the sound of laughter and clinking dishes began to rise again. Humanity had just claimed its place at the table, but as Leah stood watching the stars, a small part of her couldn't shake the feeling that Jatok's story wasn't over, and that the galaxy wasn't quite done testing her yet. In the days following the competition, Leah found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The applause had died down, the critics had scattered, and Elysium Station had returned to its usual hum of activity, but for Leah, nothing felt the same. She had succeeded in the challenge, but it wasn't just about winning. It was about something far deeper. Her victory had been a statement, not just for her, but for every black chef, every underrepresented voice that had long been overlooked in the galaxy's culinary elite. Her dish had carried the weight of generations, and now it was clear her culture, her history, had a place at the table. Leah had grown up with the rhythms of New Orleans in her blood. She could still hear her mother humming in the kitchen as the smell of gumbo, fried chicken, and collard greens filled the air. Food in her family wasn't just a way to sustain the body, it was a way to nourish the soul, to pass down stories, to connect with each other in ways words alone could not. But that richness, that legacy had often been dismissed in favor of cleaner, more polished culinary art. To the elites of the galaxy, the food she made was rough, unsophisticated, a byproduct of a primitive culture. Now, as she walked through the bustling hallways of Elysium Station, Leah realized that her victory was only the beginning. The dishes she had prepared, blending the spices and flavors of Earth with the unfamiliar ingredients from other planets, had bridged a gap that seemed insurmountable. She had given them something they had never considered: heart. But there was still work to do. She knew that. The culinary world, no matter how much it had changed in that one moment, still held biases that ran deep. It wasn't enough to win a competition. She had to keep fighting for space at the table. As she entered her new restaurant, one that had been offered to her by the station's management in the wake of her success, Leah took a deep breath. It was bigger than she had imagined. The kitchen gleamed with stainless steel, the counters pristine and empty, waiting for her to make it her own. The walls were adorned with a few abstract art pieces, sleek and modern. Everything about the space screamed luxury and refinement, but to Leah, it felt cold. She wasn't sure what she had expected. Perhaps she had imagined something warmer, a place that felt more like home. But as her fingers brushed the cool surface of the counter, she realized that warmth was something she would have to create herself. This was her space now, and it was up to her to fill it with the flavors of her heritage. The first day in the kitchen was chaotic. There was so much to do. Staff to train, menus to finalize, recipes to perfect. The pressure was immense. But Leah was used to pressure. It was all she had known growing up in a city where survival often felt like the ultimate goal. Cooking had been her escape, her way of claiming a piece of herself in a world that constantly tried to take it away. As the evening approached, a handful of chefs gathered around her, waiting for her direction. They were all strangers, some human, some alien, but they were eager to learn. Leah could see it in their eyes. They were curious but hesitant. They didn't fully understand what it meant to cook with soul, to cook with meaning. But Leah wasn't concerned with that yet. She had time. "Tonight, we're not just making food," Leah said, her voice steady but filled with passion. "We're making history. We're going to create something that people will remember, not just because it tastes good, but because it tells a story. And that story starts with each one of you. You can't cook the way I cook unless you understand that food isn't just about technique. It's about bringing your whole self to the table." Her words hung in the air for a moment, and then, as if on cue, the staff set to work. The kitchen filled with the sounds of chopping, sizzling, and the hum of cooking, a symphony that echoed the vibrancy of New Orleans, of Earth, and of her ancestors. Leah watched them, feeling the weight of the responsibility settle in her chest. This was her chance to teach them, to show them what she had learned over the years, not just about food, but about who she was. It wasn't just about cooking dishes, it was about reclaiming something that had always been hers. As the first orders came in, Leah began to plate the food. She took a deep breath and added the final touch, a sprig of fresh parsley from her earth garden. The dish was simple, but it was perfect. It was a reminder of where she had come from, of the flavors that had shaped her, and of the family that had passed them down. When the food was served, the reaction was immediate. The guests, a mix of station elites and curious travelers, took their first bites, and the room seemed to go silent. Their faces softened, their eyes widened, and then slowly they began to murmur among themselves. Leah could hear snippets of their conversation. "This tastes familiar. I feel like I'm back home." It wasn't the sleek, polished perfection that the galaxy's elites were used to, but it was something far more powerful. It was truth, and for the first time Leah felt like she had finally created something that belonged to her. Word of Leah's restaurant spread like fire through the corridors of Elysium Station. Within days, every table was reserved, every seat filled with beings from across the galaxy, eager to taste what the humans were calling soul food. Reporters floated through the crowd with hovering cameras, broadcasting her every move to the far reaches of space, but not everyone was celebrating. In the quiet upper levels of the station, Jartok sat alone in his office, the glow from the city below reflecting in his glass-like eyes. His restaurant, once the crown jewel of Elysium, was now half empty. Where alien aristocrats once lined up to taste his crystalline perfection, they now whispered his name in tones of pity or derision. They said he had been outcooked by a human. The words haunted him. He replayed the competition in his mind 100 times, analyzing every moment, every breath, every bite. His dish had been flawless. It had adhered to every rule, every principle the Jatu culinary tradition demanded. And yet, they had chosen her, a human, a creature who didn't even measure her ingredients properly, a woman whose cooking was messy, unpredictable, chaotic. He clenched his jaw, his long fingers digging into the metal of his desk until it bent slightly. "Emotion," he hissed. They were fooled by emotion. The door behind him slid open. His assistant, a younger Jatu chef named Varlek, hesitated before stepping inside. "Master Jartok," he said cautiously, "the station council is requesting a statement about your plans." "There are rumors that you intend to retire." Jartok turned sharply. "Retire?" His voice dripped with contempt. "Do they think I will fade quietly while that human woman defiles the art of cuisine? No, I will reclaim what is mine." Varlek shifted uneasily. "With respect, sir, many believe she has changed things. Even some of the judges are praising her approach." They say, Jartok interrupted, his voice sharp as a blade. "They say because they are weak. They crave comfort. They mistake simplicity for depth." Varlek hesitated, then spoke softly. "I tasted her food." Jartok's eyes narrowed. "And?" Varlek's voice trembled slightly. "It was unlike anything I've ever experienced. It wasn't perfect, but it felt real. It reminded me of my mother's cooking, before I became your student." The silence that followed was suffocating. Jartok stared at his apprentice for a long time, and for the first time there was something in his gaze that wasn't rage. It was uncertainty. He turned away, dismissing Varlek with a flick of his hand. "Leave me." When the door closed, Żartok sat in the quiet, his thoughts a storm. He remembered Leah's face, the defiance in her eyes, the steady voice that had told him perfection meant nothing without soul. He had dismissed her words as ignorance then. Now they lingered, gnawing at the edges of his mind. Down below, the sound of celebration reached him even here. Music, laughter, the clinking of glasses. Her restaurant was alive in ways his never had been. People didn't just eat her food, they felt it. For a moment something unfamiliar stirred in him. Not envy, not hate. It was closer to doubt. The Jah-2 had built their entire culinary empire on precision, on purity of flavor, on removing the chaos of emotion. But what if that chaos was what made food alive? He pushed the thought away, but it refused to leave. Later that night, he disguised himself and descended to the lower decks of Elysium, where Leah's restaurant glowed like a heartbeat in the metallic gloom. He slipped inside unnoticed, taking a seat in the corner. The air was thick with the smell of spice and warmth. Laughter echoed from every table. He watched as Leah moved through the kitchen, her presence commanding yet tender. When his plate arrived, a dish of slow-cooked meat and grains, bathed in sauce rich with unfamiliar spices, he hesitated. Then he took a bite. The taste hit him like a memory he didn't know he had. It was warmth. It was home. It was everything his sterile perfection had stripped away. His chest tightened. He set the spoon down, staring at it in disbelief. For the first time in centuries, Żartok didn't know what to say. He stood and left without being seen, the sound of laughter following him out into the night. As he walked the corridors of the station, the weight of his empire pressed against him. He realized that for all his mastery, he had never truly understood what Leah had given them, what he had lost long ago. Still, pride would not let him accept it. Not yet. "Enjoy your moment, human," he muttered under his breath, "because when I return, it will be to end this illusion once and for all." But deep inside, beneath the layers of pride and resentment, something small had cracked and he couldn't ignore it anymore. The months after her victory transformed Leah's life in ways she could never have imagined. Her restaurant, the Hearth of Humanity, had become a cultural beacon on Elysium Station, a place where diplomats, travelers, and ordinary workers alike came together, drawn by the warmth of her cooking. Yet as the fame grew, Leah began to notice something more profound happening. It wasn't just her dishes that were changing the galaxy, it was the people she taught. She had become a mentor almost by accident. One evening, as she prepped for the dinner rush, a young human dishwasher named Arin approached her with nervous hesitation. "Chef Leah," he said, his voice shaky, I've been watching you cook. I want to learn." Leah glanced up, wiping her hands on her apron. "Learn to cook or learn to fight the whole damn galaxy?" Arin blinked, startled. "Both," he said after a pause, and she couldn't help but laugh. From that moment on, Leah began to take him under her wing. What started with small lessons, how to balance heat and flavor, how to trust his instincts, soon became something more. She saw in him the same hunger she had once carried, the need to prove himself in a world that didn't see his worth. He wasn't the only one. Within weeks, others began to ask for her guidance. Humans, yes, but also aliens, who had grown tired of sterile perfection and wanted to understand what it meant to cook with feeling. Leah found herself surrounded by students from every corner of the galaxy. Some were timid, some arrogant, some desperate, but each of them carried a spark, and it was her job to ignite it. "Listen," she told them one morning as they gathered around the kitchen island, notebooks and utensils in hand. "You can't learn to cook from a manual. Cooking isn't science, it's translation. Every spice, every flame, every mistake, it's language. You're not just feeding the body, you're talking to the soul." A young Jah-2 apprentice, his blue-gray skin glistening under the lights, frowned. "But emotions are unreliable. They cloud the process." Leah smirked. "That's what they told me too, but emotions are the process. You just have to learn how to listen to them." There were long nights, filled with laughter and frustration, with burnt pans and triumphant flavors. She saw them struggle, fail, and rise again. And in their failures, she saw herself. The woman who once trembled under Jatok's gaze, terrified of making a mistake. Now she was the one teaching others how to turn mistakes into masterpieces. Samira watched her with quiet pride. "You're building more than a restaurant, Leah," she said one night as they closed the kitchen. "You're building a legacy." Leah paused, leaning against the counter. "Legacy?" she repeated softly. "That's a big word." Samira smiled. "It fits you." As her reputation grew, invitations poured in from across the galaxy, requests to speak at culinary conferences, to collaborate with alien chefs, even to represent Earth in the Intergalactic Council of Artisans. But Leah refused to forget where she came from. She turned down most offers, choosing instead to stay close to her kitchen, to her students, to her roots. Her most meaningful moments weren't in front of cameras or in the presence of dignitaries. They were right here, in the kitchen, watching her students take their first confident steps. When Arin served his first dish to a table of alien guests, a delicate fusion of Earth's cornbread and the sweet-fruited syrups of the Varin homeworld, Leah felt something stir in her chest. The guests smiled, murmured their appreciation, and Arin looked to her, eyes bright with disbelief. "You did that," she said, pride warming her voice. He shook his head. "We did." For Leah, it was moments like that that mattered most. Not fame, not recognition, but seeing others find their voice through flavor, watching them discover that food wasn't just about sustenance, it was about connection, about resilience, about hope. And in that kitchen, surrounded by the clatter of pans and the hum of alien voices, speaking the universal language of taste, Leah realized something profound. She had become what she'd needed all along, not just a chef, but a teacher. Yet even as she built her new family of cooks and dreamers, a whisper of unease lingered in the back of her mind. Change had always come with resistance, and somewhere out there she could still feel Jatok's shadow stretching toward her. For now, though, she smiled and said, "All right, team, let's make something worth remembering." The turning point came when Leah received an unexpected message from the Intergalactic Culinary Council. They wanted to host an official cultural exchange, an event where chefs from every corner of the galaxy could share their traditions, techniques, and philosophies. It was unprecedented, and they wanted her to lead it. At first, she hesitated. The idea of standing before the galaxy's elite once again, representing not just Earth but every marginalized culture, filled her with both pride and unease. She remembered what it had felt like the first time she stood before them, small, judged, dismissed. But this time she wasn't walking in alone. Behind her stood an entire movement of chefs, humans, and aliens alike who had tasted her vision and believed in it. Samira was the first to push her forward. "You've got to do it," she said, her voice brimming with conviction. "They're listening now, Leah. If you don't speak, they'll fill the silence with their own voices again. Make them hear ours." Leah nodded slowly. She knew Samira was right. The world was shifting, but change was fragile. It needed to be nurtured, protected. And so, with her heart pounding, she accepted. The event was set to take place in the Grand Hall of Elysium Station, a place once reserved for royal banquets and political summits. Now its golden domes and crystal floors would host a celebration of food, culture, and unity. For the first time, the Jatu, the Varin, the Solari, and dozens of other species would cook side by side with humans. On the day of the exchange, Leah stood at the center of the hall, surrounded by hundreds of chefs, each representing their homeworld. The air was alive with the hum of conversation, the sizzle of food, and the smell of spices so diverse they created an entirely new atmosphere. It was overwhelming, but in the best possible way. She watched as Arin taught a group of Jatu apprentices how to fry Earth-style beignets, laughing as they tried to avoid splattering oil on themselves. Nearby, a Varin chef showed Samira how to temper a glowing syrup that shimmered like molten gold. Everywhere Leah looked, walls were breaking down. Language barriers, species divides, centuries of hierarchy, all melting away in the warmth of shared creation. A member of the council approached her, his translucent body catching the light. "Chef Johnson," he said, bowing slightly, "what you have done here, it is extraordinary. This is not just an exchange of recipes. It is an exchange of understanding," Leah smiled. "That's what food does. It reminds us we're more alike than we think." She spent the rest of the day moving between stations, tasting, advising, laughing. But as the event went on, she began to notice something even more remarkable. The chefs weren't just recreating their own dishes anymore. They were blending them. Earth spices mixed with jartu starches, varin fruits infused with human bourbon glaze. Every plate was a fusion of worlds. When it was time for the closing meal, Leah took the stage. The crowd quieted as she looked out over them. Hundreds of faces, thousands of eyes, all waiting. "This," she began, gesturing to the long tables filled with food, "is what happens when we stop trying to prove who's better and start learning from each other. Every dish here tells a story, some of struggle, some of discovery, but all of them share one truth. We're connected." She paused, her voice softening. "Where I come from, we say that food is love made visible. Maybe out here in the stars, it's love made universal." The applause that followed wasn't just polite, it was thunderous. The hall erupted in cheers, laughter, even tears. Chefs hugged, sharing plates, trading recipes, exchanging promises to collaborate again. For the first time in the station's history, it felt like a true community, one not divided by species or class, but united by taste and heart. As the celebration continued, Leah slipped away to the edge of the hall. She looked out through the transparent dome at the swirling nebula beyond, its colors shifting like flame. Samira found her there, 2 glasses of spiced wine in hand. "You did it," she said, handing her one. Leah took the glass and smiled faintly. "We did it," she corrected, "but this is just the beginning." They clinked their glasses together, the sound ringing like a quiet promise. Far below, the galaxy carried on, unchanged on the surface but different in the ways that mattered. And for the first time, Leah felt that maybe humanity wasn't just surviving among the stars anymore. They were finally belonging. Years passed, but the echoes of that night, the night of the cultural exchange, never faded. What had begun as a single act of defiance in a sterile kitchen had evolved into something far greater. Leah Johnson was no longer just a chef. She had become a symbol. Across the galaxy, new restaurants, schools, and culinary institutes were opening, many of them inspired by her teachings. They called it the human method, though Leah always laughed at the name. "It's not just human," she would say. "It's universal." Her restaurant, the Hearth of Humanity, had become a pilgrimage site for chefs from every species. People traveled light years for a seat at her table. The line outside the door never seemed to end, filled with travelers clutching glowing data tablets, eager to capture a glimpse of the woman who had changed the way the galaxy thought about food. But for Leah, it was never about fame. It was about connection, about the simple act of bringing people together over a shared meal. She had built a new team over the years, an eclectic mix of species, ages, and backgrounds. Arin, now one of her senior chefs, ran the kitchen with the same intensity she once did. Samira had taken on the role of co-owner, her sharp business sense keeping the operation grounded, while Leah focused on mentoring the next generation. Together they had turned the hearth into a living, breathing organism, constantly changing, evolving, reflecting the world around it. On quiet nights, Leah would step out into the main hall and listen. The laughter, the conversations, the clinking of glasses, it was music to her ears. The air was thick with the scent of spice, smoke, and memory. It reminded her of home, of New Orleans, of her mother's kitchen filled with warmth and noise and love. But now that warmth had expanded far beyond Earth. It belonged to the stars. She thought often about how far things had come since that first challenge with Jartok. His name had faded from headlines, though she still heard whispers of him, rumors of a distant culinary retreat, where he had retreated to rediscover himself. A part of her hoped he had found peace. Despite everything, she had never hated him. If anything, she was grateful. Without his arrogance, she might never have found the fire to prove herself. One afternoon, as Leah reviewed new apprentice applications, Aaron entered her office holding a hollow slate. "You're not going to believe this," he said, a grin spreading across his face. "What is it now?" she asked, arching an eyebrow. "A request from the Galactic Academy of Arts," he said, handing her the slate. "They want to name a culinary wing after you." "The Leah Johnson Institute of Cultural Gastronomy." Leah blinked, staring at the words. For a moment, she didn't know how to respond. She'd never cared much for accolades, but as she looked at the message again, she realized what it represented. It wasn't about her name, it was about what her name stood for. Representation, possibility, hope. "I guess we did something right," she said softly, handing the slate back. Aaron smiled. "We?" She chuckled. "All right, you did some things right too." Later that evening, Leah stood on the observation deck of Elysium Station, gazing out at the endless sea of stars. Each one shimmered like a memory, a promise, a future yet to be written. Behind her, the hum of her kitchen continued, a sound that had become the rhythm of her life. Samira joined her, leaning against the railing. "You ever think about going back?" she asked. "To Earth?" Leah mused. "Sometimes. But I think Earth's here now." She tapped her chest. "It's in everything we do, every dish we serve, every story we tell." Samira nodded, a faint smile on her lips. "You've built something that'll last, Leah." Leah looked back at the stars, their light reflecting in her eyes. "No," she said quietly. "We have. All of us. Every person who ever cooked, loved, or dreamed of being seen." A silence settled between them, warm and content. For the first time in a long time, Leah felt at peace, not because she had conquered anything, but because she had created something that would outlive her. In the far distance, a freighter from Earth passed through the station's orbit, its engines glowing a soft amber. Leah smiled faintly. Humanity had come a long way, and somewhere deep in her heart, she knew, the story wasn't ending. It was only beginning to simmer. The message arrived without warning. It was encoded, sent through private channels, and marked with a name Leah hadn't seen in years, Ja-Tok. For a long moment, she simply stared at the hollow screen. Her first instinct was disbelief, followed quickly by curiosity. Ja-Tok had vanished from the public eye not long after their competition. Rumors said he'd abandoned the culinary world entirely, retreating to the outer rim to live in solitude. Others whispered that he'd gone mad, consumed by his obsession with reclaiming perfection. Yet here he was, reaching out to her after nearly a decade of silence. Samira entered the office, balancing 2 cups of tea. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, setting one on the table. Leah gestured to the message. "Close. Ja-Tok just contacted me." Samira blinked. Ja-Tok, the same Ja-Tok who called human cuisine an insult to art. "The very one." Samira raised an eyebrow. "What does he want?" Leah tapped the hologram, and Ja-Tok's message played. His image flickered to life, older now, the silver sheen of his skin dimmer, his once proud posture softened. His voice, however, was still unmistakable. "Chef Johnson," he began, "it has taken me years to find the right words. I once believed that emotion had no place in creation. I was wrong. You were right. Your food taught me something I could not admit then, that perfection without feeling is hollow. I wish to meet, not as rivals, as chefs." Leah exhaled slowly, unsure of what to feel. Forgiveness came naturally to her, but old wounds had a way of reopening when least expected. Samira studied her carefully. "You're not actually thinking of going, are you?" "I am," Leah said. "If he's reaching out, then maybe he's changed. Maybe this is the conversation we were always meant to have." Samira frowned but didn't argue. She knew Leah well enough to understand that curiosity was a part of her nature. A few days later, Leah found herself aboard a shuttle heading toward the distant colony of Verathis 9, where Ja-Tok's coordinates led. The journey was long and quiet, giving her too much time to think. She remembered the way he used to look at her, with contempt, yes, but also with something deeper, something like fear. Perhaps, she thought, he had feared what he didn't understand. When she arrived, she was surprised to find not a grand estate or an alien palace, but a modest structure nestled in the glowing fields of an agricultural planet. The air was thick with the scent of herbs and soil. Żartok was waiting outside. He looked smaller somehow. The arrogance that once defined him had melted away, replaced by something human, humility. "Chef Johnson," he said, inclining his head, "thank you for coming." "Just Leah," she replied with a faint smile. "It's been a long time." He nodded. "Too long." They spoke for hours in his garden, surrounded by alien flora. Żartok explained how, after losing the competition, he had spent years chasing the same sterile perfection that had defined his craft. But the more he pursued it, the emptier it became. Eventually, he abandoned the kitchens of the elite and began studying ancient recipes from forgotten worlds, foods prepared by hand without machines, guided by instinct and emotion. "I realized," he said, his voice quiet, "that what you showed me wasn't weakness. It was balance. You reminded me that food is not just science, it's memory." Leah listened in silence, feeling something loosen in her chest. She had spent so many years building her legacy that she'd forgotten the person who had first challenged her to reach beyond herself. He gestured toward a table set for two. "I've prepared something for us. My first attempt at what you once called soul food." Leah laughed softly. "That I have to see." They ate together beneath the violet sky, the flavors simple but full of heart. For the first time they spoke not as adversaries but as equals. When the meal ended, Żartok leaned back and said, "You changed me, Leah, more than I care to admit." She smiled gently. "You changed me too. I just had to fight you first to see it." He chuckled, the sound low and genuine. Perhaps humanity's greatest strength is not innovation, but forgiveness. Leah lifted her glass. "To both," she said. "Innovation and forgiveness." They clinked glasses, the sound echoing softly in the quiet night. For Leah, it wasn't just closure, it was healing. And for Żartok, it was redemption. The years had been kind to Leah, but they had also taught her the quiet ache of time. Her hair, now streaked with silver, framed a face lined with stories, each wrinkle a testament to laughter, tears, and the relentless pursuit of meaning. The hearth of humanity thrived beyond her imagination. Her students, once unsure hands learning to chop, stir, and season, were now masters in their own right, spreading her philosophy across the stars. Humanity's name had become synonymous with flavor, with feeling. Yet, as the galaxy embraced her legacy, Leah felt something stirring inside her, a question she could no longer ignore. What comes after the lesson? One evening, as she walked through the quiet corridors of the restaurant after closing, she paused near the wall where dozens of hollow photos shimmered softly. Each captured moment told a story: students graduating, guests smiling mid-bite, alien chefs laughing as they experimented with gumbo for the first time. It was beautiful, but it wasn't complete. Leah felt the weight of something unfinished, an echo she couldn't name. She turned when she heard the familiar sound of footsteps. Arin appeared, his apron still dusted with flour, his eyes bright despite the long day. "You're still here," he said. "Habit," she replied, smiling. "I like hearing the kitchen breathe after everyone's gone." "Reminds me of when I first started." He joined her by the wall, studying the photos. "You've built something no one thought possible, Leah. You changed how the galaxy eats, how it thinks about food." Leah chuckled softly. "You make it sound like I started a revolution." Arin grinned. "You did." She looked at him for a moment, pride swelling in her chest. "And you carried it farther than I ever could." He shook his head. "I learned from you, we all did." Leah placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then promise me something," she said quietly. "Don't stop teaching. Don't let this turn into a museum. Keep it alive. Keep it growing." "I promise," he said, his voice steady. Satisfied, Leah exhaled, the tension leaving her body. "Good. Then I can finally rest." Arin frowned. "Rest? What do you mean?" She smiled faintly. "I've been invited to Earth. They're opening a new culinary archive, a place to preserve the roots of every culture we've shared. They want me to curate it. I think it's time to go home." The words felt strange on her tongue. Home. Earth had become a distant memory, a story she carried in her food. Yet now, as she imagined returning, she felt a deep longing rise within her. The pull of the soil, the rhythm of jazz, the warmth of southern air. Arin was quiet for a long moment before finally saying, "You'll come back, right?" Leah smiled. "Maybe. Maybe not. But you'll know where to find me. In the food, in the stories, in the people who keep cooking." The next morning, the kitchen buzzed with its usual rhythm, but there was an air of something different, anticipation, reverence. Leah moved through the space one last time, tasting sauces, adjusting seasonings, sharing laughter. Every corner held a memory, every dish, a piece of her heart. Before leaving, she gathered her team. "Listen," she said, her voice steady but soft. "You all know how to cook. You know how to lead. But never forget, food isn't just about feeding people. It's about making them feel seen. That's what matters. That's what lasts." Her words hung in the air like a blessing. As she stepped outside the restaurant, the lights of Elysium Station reflected in her eyes, bright, endless, alive. The hum of ships and chatter of travelers filled the air, a reminder of how far humanity had come. Leah looked back at the glowing sign, the hearth of humanity, and felt a warmth rise in her chest. Samira joined her at the platform, holding a small box. "You're really going?" Leah nodded. "It's time." Samira handed her the box. Inside was a wooden spoon, worn smooth from years of use. "Something to remember us by," she said. Leah smiled, tears glinting in her eyes. "You don't forget family." As the shuttle lifted off, she watched the station fade into the distance. For the first time in years, she felt no pressure, no expectation, just peace. The teacher had taught her last lesson. The fire she'd started would keep burning long after she was gone, and as the stars stretched out before her, Leah whispered to herself, "Home's not a place. It's a flavor." Earth was smaller than Leah remembered. As the shuttle broke through the atmosphere, the blue planet unfolded beneath her. A swirl of clouds and oceans, sunlight glinting like gold off the surface. For years she had dreamed of this view, and yet seeing it again filled her not with triumph, but with a deep, aching nostalgia. She wasn't returning as the girl who had left. She was coming home as the woman who had carried her people's soul across the stars. When she stepped out onto the landing platform in New Orleans, the air hit her with a wave of warmth and scent, salt, spice, and rain on stone. The hum of life was everywhere, street vendors calling out, jazz music drifting from a distant corner, laughter mingling with the rumble of thunderclouds. Leah closed her eyes and breathed deeply. After decades among the cold metals of Elysium Station, this place felt alive. She was greeted by representatives from the newly founded Earth Culinary Archive, a sprawling institution built to preserve recipes from every human culture. They were eager, reverent, almost nervous in her presence. "Chef Johnson," one of them said, "it's an honor to have you home." "The galaxy knows your name," Leah smiled faintly. "The galaxy remembers my food," she corrected. "That's all I ever wanted." They led her through the archive's halls, where holographic exhibits floated in the air, dishes from 1,000 worlds, each pulsing softly with light. But what struck her most wasn't the display of alien recipes. It was the Earth section. Every dish was alive with history. West African jollof rice, Caribbean jerk, Creole gumbo, Southern cornbread. The smells were intoxicating, a symphony of her heritage. She paused in front of one exhibit, a digital recreation of her mother's kitchen. It was perfect, right down to the chipped ceramic bowls and the fading photograph on the fridge. Leah reached out, her hand trembling as it passed through the hologram. For a moment she felt 10 years old again, standing beside her mother, stirring a pot too big for her small hands. "Don't rush it, baby," her mother's voice echoed in her memory. "Good things take time." Leah smiled softly. "You were right, Mama. You always were." Later that evening, the archive hosted a private dinner in her honor. Chefs from every continent gathered, bringing their own interpretations of her teachings. Leah watched as young cooks, many of them black, many inspired by her journey, plated dishes with trembling hands and shining eyes. Their excitement was contagious. A young girl approached her shyly, holding a bowl of food. "Chef Leah, I made this from your book," she said. "It's not perfect, but it's from my heart." Leah took a spoonful and tasted it. The flavor was raw, imperfect, full of courage. She smiled. "It's beautiful," she said. "You keep cooking like that, and you'll make people feel what I felt today." The girl beamed, and Leah felt something stir inside her, an old warmth, a spark of the same fire that had driven her all those years ago. She realized then that legacy wasn't about buildings or institutions. It was about people, about the way love passed from one hand to another, one meal at a time. After the dinner, she stepped outside alone. The city was glowing, alive with sound and light. Rain began to fall in gentle drops, warm and familiar. Leah tilted her face toward the sky, letting the rain mix with the tears she didn't bother to hide. She thought about Elysium, about Arin and Samira and the countless lives she had touched. She thought about Jatok and the strange peace they had found in that quiet garden, and she thought about her mother, whose recipes had carried her across galaxies. From the balcony, she could see the river winding through the city, just as it had when she was a child. Its surface shimmered under the streetlights, reflecting the endless dance of the stars above. Leah reached into her bag, pulled out the old wooden spoon Samira had given her, and smiled. "Still cooking, Mama," she whispered. "Still learning." A warm wind brushed her face, carrying the scent of gumbo and rain. Somewhere nearby, a band began to play, a slow, soulful melody that rose and fell like the heartbeat of the world. Leah closed her eyes and let it wash over her. For the first time, she felt everything. Earth and sky, home and distance, past and future, all blending together like the perfect dish. And in that moment, she understood what it all meant. The journey hadn't been about proving humanity's worth to the stars. It had been about reminding herself and everyone else that the soul-like flavor was infinite. As the music swelled, Leah whispered, "Let them taste forever."